This is the first little half scale flared skirt that I'd like to show you. And this is what you will be trying to achieve. This half scale skirt is cut on the fold. And you can see the grain line goes down the center front. And so there are no darts. You have two side seams and a center seam up the back so that you can put a zipper in to get the skirt on. So what's nice about this one is this is, you can see that there's kind of like one little bit of ripple or sort of flounce kind of a thing there. And when you put the grain line in the very center of the skirt, the yarns are running this way, and so gravity is sort of pulling at the fabric down here to make it go downward. And what happens is the extra fabric gets pushed to the side. So you'll see that you wind up with two ripples on the side. So your fullness is over on the side. So for someone who's fairly slim, it's a very good look. And you'll see that by changing the grain line on each flared skirt we do, if I change my grain line so that the front is on the bias, or if I change my grain line so that the straight grain is on the side, it's going to change where these ripples change. So for someone who has a fairly flat stomach, this is good. But if you have a prominent abdomen, you might want to change it, the grain line, to drape better on the body. So I'm not going to have you guys make all three. You can if you'd like to. I know that you're pressed for time taking as many classes as you're taking. So the required one is going to be this one that has the grain line down the center. But I'm going to show you the other two just so you can see that the way the skirt ripples changes with where we place the grain line. Now, on many patterns, we don't play around with the grain line that much. But for the flared skirt, it really does a lot to change the way the skirt drapes. So let me change this. So here, our second sample of a flared skirt, you'll see that I've marked the grain line here. So when you lay your pattern down, the skirt is turned at an angle, the pattern, so that you're cutting the skirt on the bias grain. So our what happens is you do have to add a center seam because you can no longer cut it on the fold because it's turned at an angle and cut on the bias. So this grain line, the skirt would be turned sideways or like at a 45-degree angle, and the grain would be running from the side seam down to the center front. And you'll notice that our ripples in the skirt, or the flounce effect that it takes, is you get more ripples in the front, and it seems to balance all the way around, that you get this nice rippling effect all the way around the skirt. So if someone has a little more fullness in the hips or a little more curvy, or if they have a little bit of a prominent abdomen or seat in the back, this kind of lays a little bit nicer than the first sample that we had. So we're going to look at one more sample where we move the grain line to the side seams, and you'll see what happens to the ripples in the skirt. Now this one has the grain lines running down the side seam. So what happens with this skirt is the sides want to hang down more straight, and it wants to push the ripples more to the front. This was made on a bigger dress form, so it's not showing as well, but you can see that this is straighter and it's pushing three ripples around the front. Now this one also has to have a center front seam because, again, with this grain line being over this way, your skirt angles when you're cutting it, so there's a little bit of more of a bias effect here at the center front, and that's what's making it ripple more. So, you know, you look at the different ways that you want that skirt to look. You know, a flared skirt could be attached to a bodice for a dress. I really like this particular style with the grain line down the side for, you know, evening apparel where you really want the skirt to stand out. Now, One thing about the flared skirts too is the shorter you make the skirt, the less of the ripples you see. So if you were doing a wedding dress or a longer dress, this particular style would be really pretty if you wanted to put like tulle under it and have the skirt stand out. And what's nice about a flared skirt versus a gathered skirt is you're maintaining that sort of smaller looking waist because you don't have a lot of fabric gathered up around the waist. The fullness is more at the bottom, and so this would move really nice as someone's walking. So like I said, it's nice to make yourself a sample of each of these styles because it helps you remember that grain line really affects the drape of the garment. And so we're going to look at a couple things on the paper patterns before we actually start draping something.